Chapter 1. A New Beginning. Sophie had always dreamed of living in the countryside. The hustle and bustle of the city was exhausting, and she yearned for the peace and tranquility that only a rural setting could offer. After saving up for years, she finally bought a small cottage on the outskirts of a picturesque village. With lush green fields and a serene lake nearby, it was everything she had hoped for. As Sophie unpacked her belongings, she felt a sense of excitement mixed with nervousness. This was a new beginning, a fresh start where she could focus on her passion for writing. She had left behind her job at a publishing house to pursue her dream of becoming an author. One sunny morning, while exploring the countryside, Sophie stumbled upon an animal shelter. The sign read, "Paws and Tails Shelter." She had always loved dogs, but had never owned one due to her hectic lifestyle in the city. Curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to visit the shelter. Chapter 2. A Fateful Encounter. Inside the shelter, Sophie was greeted by a friendly staff member named Lily. "Welcome. Are you looking to adopt a dog today?" Lily asked with a warm smile. Sophie hesitated for a moment, then replied, "I wasn't planning on it, but I'd love to see the dogs." Lily led her to a large play area where several dogs were running around, barking and playing. Among them was a particularly energetic Shiba Inu named Max. His fur was a beautiful shade of reddish-brown, and his bright, intelligent eyes caught Sophie's attention immediately. "That's Max," Lily explained. "He's been here for a while. He's a bit of a handful, but he's incredibly loyal and loving once he gets to know you." Sophie approached Max cautiously. To her surprise, Max trotted over to her, wagging his tail enthusiastically. He seemed to sense that Sophie was different, and he nuzzled her hand affectionately. "Would you like to take him for a walk?" Lily suggested. Sophie nodded, feeling a connection with Max that she couldn't explain. They walked along the paths surrounding the shelter, and Sophie found herself talking to Max as if he were an old friend. By the end of the walk, she knew she couldn't leave without him. Chapter 3. Building Trust. Bringing Max home was one of the best decisions Sophie had ever made. At first, Max was a little wary of his new surroundings, but he quickly adapted to life in the cottage. Sophie spent her days writing and taking long walks with Max by her side. They explored the fields, the lake, and even the nearby forest. Sophie soon discovered that Max was more than just a pet. He was a source of inspiration. His playful antics and boundless energy brought joy and laughter into her life. Whenever she felt stuck in her writing, Max seemed to know and would nudge her hand or bring her a toy, as if to say, "Take a break and play with me." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Max had a mischievous streak, often stealing socks or digging holes in the garden. But Sophie found it endearing. She learned to be patient with him, understanding that he was simply curious and full of life. Chapter 4. Challenges and Triumphs. Despite the idyllic setting, life in the countryside wasn't without its challenges. One stormy night, a loud crash woke Sophie from her sleep. She rushed outside to find that a tree had fallen and damaged part of the fence. Max, frightened by the noise, had bolted into the woods. Panic set in as Sophie called out for Max, but there was no response. She grabbed a flashlight and ventured into the dark, rain-soaked forest, calling his name repeatedly. After what felt like hours, she finally heard a faint whimper. Following the sound, she found Max huddled under a bush, trembling. Relief washed over her as she scooped him up and carried him back to the cottage. She dried him off and wrapped him in a warm blanket, whispering soothing words until he calmed down. That night, Max slept curled up next to Sophie, his trust in her deepening even further. Chapter 5. A New Adventure. As months turned into a year, Sophie and Max settled into a comfortable routine. Sophie's writing flourished, and she completed her first novel, inspired by her adventures with Max. She decided to send it to her former colleagues at the publishing house, and to her delight, they loved it and offered to publish it. To celebrate, Sophie planned a special trip for herself and Max. They packed up a small backpack and set off on a hiking adventure in the nearby mountains. The fresh air, stunning views, and the companionship of Max made the journey unforgettable. One evening, as they sat by a campfire, Sophie reflected on how much her life had changed. The city felt like a distant memory, and she couldn't imagine going back. Max had brought so much happiness and purpose into her life. Chapter 6. The future awaits. Sophie's book became a bestseller, and she received numerous invitations to speak at literary events. She always brought Max along, and he quickly became a favorite among her readers. People were captivated by their story of friendship and adventure. Life in the countryside continued to be a source of inspiration and contentment. Sophie wrote more books, each one inspired by the beauty of nature and the bond she shared with Max. They explored new trails, discovered hidden waterfalls, and enjoyed countless sunsets together. Through the ups and downs, Max remained by her side, a loyal and loving companion. Sophie often marveled at how a chance encounter at an animal shelter had changed her life in such a profound way. As they sat on the porch of their cottage, watching the sun set over the fields, Sophie knew that the journey of friendship with Max was the greatest story she had ever lived.